Today we are looking at muzzle inertia limits that apply in Finnish airsoft fields. The inertia limit defines the maximum kinetic inertia allowed for your BBs. Kinetic inertia is measured with a chronograph. It reads the BB's speed, and together with the known BB weight, it gives you the inertia in joules. In Japan, where airsoft originated, airsoft guns are legally limited to a maximum muzzle inertia of 0.98 joules. So why would anyone want higher inertia than 1 joule? Because it allows you to run heavier BBs, they fly more consistently and stay stable for longer distances. Heavy BBs also lose inertia to air drag much more slowly. Some examples from the world. In the US, Milsim West has been running CQB limits of 1.5 joules for over 20 years for common weapons classes like carbines and light machine guns. The Swedish organizer Nordic Milsim follows a very similar standard. In Finland's large Milsim games, such as Battlegroup, the general rifle limit is 1.7 joules, while light machine guns are allowed up to 2 joules. So that brings us to the main question. What are the muzzle inertia limits in Finnish fields for the regular weekend games? We'll go first to the results, and if you are interested in the methods, these are provided at the end of the video. I divided the fields into 2 categories: indoor arenas where gameplay is fully or mostly indoors, and outdoor fields. Outdoor fields can still include buildings and CQB areas, but the gameplay isn't limited only to close quarters and often include wide open areas. Alright, let's start with the indoor fields. I found 18 in total. 44% of them utilize a Japanese-style power limit of under 1 joule. However, 4 of those have specific exceptions. If you are over 18 or if the game is pistols only, the limit actually increases up to 1.2 joules. So in practice, only about a fifth of indoor fields strictly enforce a 1 joule limit across the board. On the higher end, 3 fields allow up to 1.4 joules, including one of my personal favorites, the ASA Extreme Arena. So what's my take on these indoor power limits? Honestly, a 1.4 joule limit offers much more flexibility for tuning. Most of the time I can dial my AEG perfectly between 1.1 and 1.3 joules, so a 1.4 gives me that comfortable ceiling. While 1.2 joules is fine, the 1 joule limit feels a bit anemic, unless the field is nothing but tight corners. People who started airsoft back in the 90s probably remember Tokyo-Marui AEGs that shot about 0.7 joules. While Japan has since slightly raised those limits, Japanese-made guns are still capped at 0.98 joules today. Such setups are a bit underpowered for outdoors, at least in my opinion. That's a big reason why airsoft in Japan is predominantly played indoors. So, outdoor fields, they usually run separate rules based on your weapon class. The rules cover power limits, full auto restrictions, and the minimum engagement distances, or MEDs. For this comparison, I have broken the guns down into 4 categories. First, the general category. These are your standard AEGs, gas guns and HPAs with full auto, usually your basic M4s and AK platforms, the things players are mostly running. Second, LMGs and support weapons. These are a bit rare during your typical weekend skirmish. Third, DMRs or designated marksman rifles. These are your semi-auto only sniper rifles. And finally, the most powerful category, bolt-action snipers. Now for the general rifle category, this is where preferences and field rules start to vary. Limits usually range from 1.2 to 1.7 joules. 2/3 of the fields I surveyed have a 1.7 joule limit. If you combine the 1.6 and 1.7 joule brackets, you are looking at 80% of Finnish outdoor fields. That's 4 out of 5. Meanwhile, the lower end of the scale, 1.2 joules, appeared in less than 10% of my data. Clearly, players and organizers prefer that extra punch outdoors. My own small-scale polls on Facebook and YouTube backed this up. Roughly 3 out of 4 of those who answered said the outdoor limit should be at least 1.5, if not 1.7 joules. How about full auto? It is almost the standard here. 3 out of 4 fields allow it, though 15% enforce a minimum engagement distance if you are having burst or full auto. Thankfully, the vast majority of players use full auto responsibly, but there is always that very small minority who just spray and pray in the heat of the moment without thinking. So, how are the fields handling this? One way is a total ban on full auto or binary triggers. Others take a hybrid approach using designated CQB zones, where you are restricted to semi-auto while full auto is still fair game in the woods. Since getting lit up at point-blank range isn't fun for anyone, at least 5 fields have implemented a 10-meter safety distance for full auto. But I think the most interesting solution is in Järvenpää. There you can run a rifle up to 1.7 joules on semi, but full auto is strictly reserved for SMGs shooting at 1.2 joules or less. Sometimes too much shooting is restricted by using real cap magazines. This means you only load about as much BBs as a real firearm would hold, usually around 30. Naturally, this cuts down pointless shooting, because if you miss, you are out of ammo. It adds a great layer of realism, but there is a catch that real caps are almost impossible to enforce. Unless a ref is checking every single mag on the field, you are basically relying on the honor system. Outdoors, most of your engagements are going to happen at distances over 10 meters. So the real question is, how fast does a BB actually lose its energy? Based on data from the Airsoft trajectory project, a gun shooting at 1.5 joules will see its energy drop significantly by the time the BB travels just 10 meters. In fact, with almost all common BB weights, the energy falls below 1 joule at that distance. The only outlier is the exceptionally heavy 0.43 gram BB, which just barely brushes the 1 joule mark. And as you can see from the graph, there is a clear trend. Heavy BBs retain their kinetic energy much longer than lighter ones. Next up, support weapons and LMGs. These are the heavy hitters designed for suppressive fire, so naturally they are meant to be shot on full auto. Power limits here generally range between 1.5 and 2 joules, with 70% of fields allowing that upper 2 joule limit. How about the safety distances? The rules range from use your common sense to a strict minimum engagement distance of 10 meters to 25 meters. For the 2 joule setups, the data shows a split. 58% of fields set their safety margin to 10 to 15 meters, while the remaining 42% push it back further to 20 to 25 meters. Moving on to DMRs or designated marksman rifles, for your standard DMR build, the power limits usually fluctuate between 1.7 and 2.5 joules. However, there are 2 interesting regional outliers, Oulu and Satasoft. They have created a heavy DMR class with a 3 joule limit and a strict 30 meters safety distance. In Oulu, you even have to be 18 years or older to run the heavy DMR setup. But looking at the country as a whole, roughly 3/4 of Finnish fields set their DMR limit at 2.25 joules, and as for safety distances at that power level, they range from 10 to 25 meters, but 70% were 15 to 20 meters. And finally, we have the heavyweights bolt-action sniper rifles. Power limits for these single-shot wields range anywhere from 2.25 all the way up to 4 joules. Now that 4 joule limit is rare. I only found it in 3 fields: Iisalmi, Satakunta and Vaasa. At that power level, you are looking at a serious safety distance of 30 to 40 meters. However, the national standard is much more consistent. 3 out of 4 fields cap snipers at 3 joules, and in half of those cases the minimum engagement distance is set at 20 meters. An important rule was common that if you are running anything over 1.7 joules, a low-powered sidearm is mandatory. To wrap things up, here is the summary of the Finnish airsoft landscape. First, for your standard rifles, the 1.7 joule limit is the clear favorite on outdoor fields, usually with full auto allowed. Personally, I find the 1.2 or 1.4 joule limits too restrictive for the outdoors. Simply, the 1.7 joule is great for outdoors in my opinion. And finally, my take on full auto. I am a fan of the hybrid approach. When you are in a CQB area, stick to semi only. Once you are back in the open woods, feel free to use full auto, just keep it reasonable. And then the methods section, how the data was compiled. 3 sources. First, Kuulaportti. I checked fields that seem to be currently active. Also found some inactive fields and those were not included here. Second, Atom Airsoft website hosts a comprehensive list of local Finnish airsoft associations. And third, I did some Google search. The percentages were calculated only for data that were listed to the websites. Thank you for your interest.